Welcome to the UnStruktured podcast. In this episode, I talk with Dan Trapp, C-suite and senior leadership headhunter for the sports and outdoor industry. With 30 years of leadership experience working with companies like Salomon, Hoka, and Columbia Sportswear, Dan now uses his expertise and network to help brands build high-caliber leadership teams. Dan and I connect on our early years working together at Columbia, his journey through the industry, and his choice to become a recruiter and mentor through founding Trapp Executive Search and his new YouTube channel and podcast called Sports and Outdoor Mentors. I'm Michelle Rose, and this is UnStruktured. This episode of UnStruktured is brought to you by Scholler, the global textile company headquartered in Switzerland, specializing in the development and manufacturing of high-performance fabric and textile technologies for athletic, outdoor, fashion, and workwear categories. Founded more than 150 years ago, Scholler calls upon its vast history of experience working with the most advanced equipment in compliance with the world's toughest environmental systems. Quality and sustainability have always served as the brand's core principles, with the entire production chain, from raw materials to the finished product, intensely scrutinized. For more information, visit www.schoeller-textiles.com. Well, welcome. I'm so glad you're here and are willing to spend time talking with me. Now, a fellow podcaster is really exciting. I'm glad to have you here, Dan. It's great to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm very happy to be here. Happy to
Yay.
chat.
Happy to chat. I know this is what I do. Why I do what I do is because I love to talk. And so that's why I take them long. I like the long form personally, but I was thinking about, we know that we met working together at Columbia Sportswear, but I was trying to remember when. Do you remember when? Just kind of, we just were around in the business meetings.
So, yeah, I started at Columbia in late 2001, and I would say it was probably maybe a bit longer, maybe 3-4 years, or 3-4 years into my time at Columbia, and I was attending the business unit meetings for apparel, and yeah, got to know you then. I remember we had a little bit of a group with Kurt Foster, yourself, Elena George, myself, a few of the other guys from the European team, and it was it was a long time ago, but it was a good time. It was good days.
It was good. I think I started a few months after you, beginning of 2002 and 2001, but I started interning and then moved into design associate and then designer, and I became the first international designer for the company. They built the role around, another role. They took me and built up the role. And so that's when I got to hire Elena as my assistant, and Kurt became the merchant. And so we were our little trio.
That's it. That's it. Yes. Yeah. Now that makes sense.
That
makes sense.
Yeah, that was the best. It was the best. And I love those meetings because I learned so much, being that fly on the wall. Not every company lets you do that. But we would go in as the design teams, merchant teams, we would sit in around the edges of the room while all the, business unit would meet around the big table, and we would do our presentations. And so we would do US, and then Europe would come in. And that was my favorite because I loved listening to the banter between all the different countries, with those were quite heated. And
of course, where you have the more emotional Latin countries, and then the more conservative, I would say, let's say Central European countries, and then the Scandinavian team as well. They were good. They were fun periods. I really enjoyed those meetings as well. I mean, it was a big investment in terms of time, obviously flying over to Portland. For me in those days from the UK, and we were there. I feel like it was 2-3 days, those meetings.
I
They were
think
pretty
so.
long.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but it was great. As you said, I mean, such a great opportunity to learn. Obviously,
Mhm.
we were learning somehow different things.
Yeah.
For me, it was just so eye-opening to be in a global brand, in the global office,
Mhm.
understanding a little bit how things worked. And yeah, I mean, it was just an amazing opportunity for me to kind
Yeah,
of better understand actually how is a brand run, and how is a
yeah.
collection built. Because
Mhm.
all the time, because my previous experience had always just been either at retail or
Right.
on the sales side. So it just happens, the product is just there. And this is the first time where you're like, okay, this is actually how it happens. This is how it comes to fruition,
Right.
and this is why the color is like this, or the design is like this, or whatever it might be. And I
Yeah.
think it adds so much value and just brought everything to life for me anyway.
Was it for you? It was the same thing for me on the design side, and it was my first experience really doing that. So that set my baseline for any other job I had in the future. Was that was my expectation, and I found that there weren't any others that were really like that. I'm curious how that felt for you there, and if you experienced that somewhere else as well.
Yeah, I think I at the time I had no reference, so for
Right.
me at the time
That
it
was
was
me.
just somehow normal. But I mean, I spent 13 years at Columbia,
Wow.
so I attended a lot of those meetings over the time, and obviously the process evolved and the
Mhm.
participants have evolved over time.
Right.
And gradually, I would say that it got to be less people in those meetings.
Mm, mhm,
Then
mhm,
after Columbia, I spent a year roughly with Hoka, and that was at the reasonably early days of Hoka. So we had pretty direct access to the product team
mhm,
in those
mhm.
days.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then after Hoka, I joined Salomon, and I would say that was pretty similar to the Columbia way of working. At least when I joined,
Mm,
we tried to we tried to make it a little bit more strategic and a bit less tactical. I think the feedback in the early days tended to be very not on the right level. It would be
mm,
like, okay,
mhm,
the zip, needs to move a
mhm.
centimeter over this side, or the red needs to be a slightly different shade. And
Right.
we tried to kind of elevate the discussions and the input, but also that was a change for me, because up until that point I had always been in a regional or local organization, whereas at that
Okay.
point I was at the global organization. So I guess I had been lucky to have experienced it on both sides, to
Mhm.
understand the perspective of what each side was looking for and what they were looking to get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would say at Salomon it was reasonably similar.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I thought for myself, it was a great experience from a as a designer to be able to be part of the US line, as well as the only designer really at the time that was able to be part of all the European, the Russian, the Asian, Japan, Korea, Southern Hemisphere stuff, and to get a global perspective. And that's something that I don't get to talk with a lot of people about, is having that global perspective of understanding the differences between all the cultures, which I thrived in. I loved talking with different people, and it helped me at the factory level. And I think that that's something that you've done that in your business, and I'm sure you're taking that to your new role in recruiting, to be able to look at a wider range to help fill all these roles. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as you said, there's so much value to having a global perspective, and of course, it's difficult to understand all of the variances and differences by market, but at
Of
least
course.
I would say, the main ones, for me, I can, you can probably split Southern, Central, and Northern Europe and draw some conclusions, although of course there are even differences within there.
Yep.
And then the same thing between the US and Canada, but you can get kind of a North American perspective, a South American perspective,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
a perspective of China, Japan being quite different, as you said, Korea as well. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, there are probably 10, somehow maybe 6 to 10 regions that you can somehow bucket a little bit
Mm,
and pull out some observations linked to the culture, and because it is very different, and you know
yeah.
how that impacts the product, but also not just the product. I think how the consumer interacts with brands and product in market,
Mhm.
how
Absolutely.
what they expect is varies dramatically
Yeah. And how
in
they
those
run
markets.
sales, and retail and how that whole process. I was very surprised by all of that. But I've also found that that's something that makes me a more open-minded today in where we're moving through into this global economy, the big shifts since COVID. It's hard to kind of watch the challenges that are going on and realize like, well, we really need to listen to each other. We need to communicate. And that's what all of those meetings were really about for me is there was a lot of really strategic and intense listening. What's not being said? What's, between the lines? What's really being said? What do we really need? Where do we need to land? is
Yeah.
is the big piece. And so I want to talk about like what you're doing now very quickly because I want to get into that later and how you got there. But will you just explain, what you're doing now and, the fact that you've moved from just a high level
Yeah, no
switch
worries.
over,
Well, I'll give you
since the
the
pandemic.
elevator pitch.
Okay. And yeah. And then since the pandemic and how all that played into some of this, if it did as well. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, well, maybe I take a step back, and I've spent 28 of my 30 professional years working in the sports and the outdoor industry, so I consider myself to be pretty lucky in that sense. And I think, I started out in specialty retail in the UK and then spent 13 years, as I mentioned, with Columbia Sportswear. And already that's 20 years of my career, those two areas.
mm,
Then a brief spell with Hoka, 5 years at Salomon. And until Salomon, all of the roles had been around sales leadership. Then at
mm,
Salomon, I took over the responsibility of the apparel and gear business unit. And yeah, at that point, after 27 years in the sports and the outdoor industry, I needed a break. So I decided to leave the industry, and I joined a Finnish lifestyle brand called Marimekko as their chief sales officer.
wow. Big change.
And yeah, big change. But
Yeah.
it was funny because at the time I felt like it was a big change, but because I was staying within, let's say, a sales commercial role, I felt like,
Mm,
okay, that was in my comfort zone.
mhm,
And
mhm.
then the industry was completely out of my comfort zone. So I thought, okay, I've
Yeah.
somehow balanced it with it well. But
Yeah.
actually, in the end, I think I realized that even though my skills, I think, were reasonably transferable, my passion wasn't. And even though I loved the
Mm,
brand and the people that work there are amazing,
mm,
I just didn't have the same drive or motivation for what we were doing as
mm,
I had done in the rest of my career. So I I took the decision to leave, the difficult decision, and in fact step away from full-time employment completely after what at that point was 29 years of receiving
wow.
a nice steady monthly salary and paycheck.
Mhm.
And I decided to set up my own business, and I chose recruitment and specifically headhunting. And the reason why I did that was, well, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do my own thing is because after 21 years in public companies, I wanted to step away a little bit from the day-to-day corporate life
Mhm.
and build something of my own. And the reason recruitment is several reasons, I guess. The first is I've always loved the psychology of understanding people's motivations behind what they do.
Mhm.
And I reflected that over my career, I've worked with quite a lot of different recruiters, either as a hiring manager or as a candidate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the experience has been pretty mixed. It's not
Hmm.
all been bad for sure. There've been some really good experiences, but they've definitely been more the exception than the rule. So I felt
Yeah.
like this could be an opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I started digging into the decision making process in the sports and the outdoor industry around recruitment,
Mm.
and reasonably quickly realized, and definitely I had fallen into this trap in the past as well, that decisions around recruitment are made almost entirely by just looking backwards. So focusing
Yeah.
only on people's previous experience, which
Wow. Yeah.
of course is important. I mean, of course it is. I'm not saying it's not. But in terms of predicting future performance, understanding people's behaviors, their motivations, their values, their beliefs, and how those align or not with a business is
Hmm.
actually a really good predictor of future performance, particularly then when you combine that with somebody's experience.
Yeah.
So that's what I decided to do. So now, yeah, I run my own headhunting business. So I focus purely on clients within the sports and the outdoor sector, and on C-suite roles and senior leadership roles within what I would consider to be kind of the go-to-market pillar, so sales, marketing,
Yeah.
and the product creation pillar. So
Hmm.
anything kind of that falls within that, whether it's design, product development, I don't know, pattern making, whatever within that product creation pillar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started 12
Exciting.
months ago, and that's what I'm doing today. Or that's what pays the bills, let's say.
That's exciting though. Yeah. We'll get into more of this because you're doing a lot more than that too, as well, But I want to ask two things about what you just talked about. And one is the process, like you were saying that recruitment is often the decisions are made by looking backward. When you said that, it made me think about the conversations we would have at the business unit meetings about the decisions around product, because there was always that tension between merchandising wanting to look backward at sales, which was absolutely necessary. It was the foundation. I know you know where I'm going with this. And design wanting to look forward into, not just design, but that was where the tension lied, is there had to be a place between that where you're looking backward, but you're looking forward and you're looking to the people who are out there looking for things that you may not see as a merchant, or, looking at the numbers behind in the sales figures. And I see a similarity. Do you see something with that? I don't know. Am I right? I'm
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there are, of course, examples of businesses, whether it be a brand or in recruitment, of companies that are 100% one way or
Mhm,
100% the other way. In
mhm.
terms of, I think there are companies in the outdoor sports space that focus purely from a sales point of view. There
Yeah.
isn't a lot of design innovation in their process, in their approach. It's really sales driven, and I think sometimes that can work. But then I think there are other brands that go the other way, that
They're
don't
too.
listen at all to what the market's saying, and it's driven purely from a design, from an innovation perspective. And I think they can work. For me, what I like is, and you use the word there, tension.
Mhm.
I personally like that tension. Of course, it needs to
Yeah.
be a positive tension, and that's not easy, but
Yeah.
especially interestingly, especially around when we're talking about products, because people can take it quite personally.
Yeah.
So that tension sometimes can be quite emotional. But I think if there's tension there, it's good. You need that push and pull and
Yes.
that give and take to find hopefully the good solution. And I
Yeah.
think in recruitment, yeah, I think for me, the risk is if you don't bring something other than what's happened in the past experience,
Mhm.
decisions are made by the gut. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, yeah, I have a good feeling about this people, or biases come in quite a lot.
Mhm.
I didn't like the way this person shook my hand, or I don't
Right.
like the way they look on a Zoom call, like how they've done their hair, or oh, I don't like that plant behind them in the call. It's silly things that this can bias people and it can impact decision making.
Yeah.
So I like to come with another layer of information to help support the decision making process. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, just to make it more robust, and just to give that decision making process more data to be able to take the right decision.
Yeah. And there's also the issue of what I call, pigeonholing, which I want to talk more about later on and get into and come back to that about recruitment. The other piece is that I wanted to ask, like, about your transferable skills. What were your transferable skills that you would say? And it's such a very distinct question of that made you think this would be a great place for you, or even just your own passion. That combination of here's the skills I have, but also here's something I see in a place that needs maybe some help, and I have something to add.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. I think the first thing is I I don't want to speak for other people, but I hope that if you spoke to teams that I've led in the past, one of the consistent feedbacks you would get is that I think I'm quite a human leader in
Mm,
my approach.
yeah.
I try to really consider the human aspect, the people aspect of what I did from a leadership point of view. Not
Hmm.
always successfully, for sure, but I think I definitely tried to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, I've definitely in recruitment had some really bad experiences. Maybe this is because it's me, but whether it is people that don't reply, that ghost people, that don't provide feedback, I don't understand that. And I felt like this is just should just be the fundamental, the basis of what anybody in any kind of recruitment role, whether it's recruiting
Yeah.
people for the shop floor or CEOs. I think
Yeah.
communication and transparency and honesty is should be the fundamental of whatever you do. And unfortunately, it's not always the case.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I guess that would be the first thing that I felt was transferable. And I wouldn't even, it's definitely, I would say it's not even a skill, but it's somehow, it's a behavior or a personality, I guess.
It's empathy. Empathy.
Empathy, exactly. And it's
Yeah.
interesting you use that word, because actually, I believe my ability to empathize with either my customer, my candidate, my
Hmm.
team, my clients throughout my career has been a key success factor. When
Yes.
I moved from retail to sales, I believe I was reasonably successful in that sales role because I
Yeah.
understood what my customer wanted, what their buyer wanted, because I had been a buyer before.
Hmm.
When I
Hmm.
moved from being a sales rep to being a sales manager, I believed that I knew what that sales rep was looking for because I had just been it, and so on and
Yes.
so on and so on throughout my career. And
Yeah.
I think so, yeah, that empathy, but I don't think we can call empathy a skill, can we? I mean, it feels like
Yeah.
terrible that if we need to, but perhaps we do. I don't know. It's a
Well,
soft skill.
it's a soft skill and it can be trained and learned more, but there are some people who are
Mm,
born more naturally with it, and or it's developed more naturally within us. And I think that's why a lot of, like, our little group when we first started at Columbia, we connected at the levels that we were at and how we felt, because I find that I connect a lot and draw magnetically to other people who are very empathetic. But that ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, even if you haven't done the role, but to sit in their shoes and listen and hear some of their pain points or some of their excitements and pick up on it, and then say, yeah, we can work together on this. It's a willingness to be able to also, to work collaboratively. So there's a piece of that, I think, in there. And it is hard to put your finger on it. But when you see it and you know it, when you are it, you know it. Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah,
pinpoint.
no,
But
it's yeah, it's not easy. I think
yeah.
then another, I think I made some wrong conclusions about what would be transferable.
Oh, interesting.
So I knew that a key part to recruitment would be the sales side, would be the business development side to get clients essentially. And I felt that because I had been in sales roles for most of my career, let's say at least 70 to 80% of my career, I felt like that skill would be transferable, and it would actually be the easiest part of what I did.
Interesting.
And I was wrong.
What? How so?
It's been the most difficult. I I think I realized that, I say that I've been in sales for so long, but actually the last time I really did sales was a long time ago. I've
Mm,
been leading teams that have been doing sales. And I think forgot or underestimated
mm,
actually what it's like to get out there and knock on doors, as it were, whether it be virtual or physical. And I found that much, much more difficult than I expected. But on the flip side, I think what I thought I would find quite difficult was the actual sourcing candidates, finding the right candidates. And I've actually found
mm.
that side much easier, although a lot of that has come more as an indirect result of, I guess, my approach, my marketing on LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, but definitely that sales aspect, that business development side has been much more difficult than I expected, and something that
Yeah.
I thought I would be able to hit the ground running. And but yeah, no.
But now you're doing sales for yourself. There's a
Yes.
piece of that, I think we all struggle with going out on our own is that piece of marketing ourselves and doing sales for ourselves and any underlying insecurities or feelings and that are different than selling for somebody else. Being part of a team where you've got this big backing and this name and you've got this stuff that you can say and people are already receptive. And then it's just you and you're new or something and there's, well, why should I believe in you? And you're like, because I believe in myself. you know it's a different thing. Yeah, maybe.
For sure. For
Yeah,
for sure. It's a completely different thing.
yeah.
And I I think I underestimated what it would take to do that successfully. But
Hmm.
because it's interesting, like you say, you talk about the fact that you're on your own, you're doing it for yourself. Now I'm I'm an introvert. I am not somebody that is comfortable
Mm,
in large groups of people.
yeah,
I that takes all my energy if I am in that situation.
yep,
So
yeah.
so actually I thought that being on my own would somehow play to my strengths, in
Mm,
that, I'm comfortable on my own. I don't need a lot of people around me.
yeah.
But actually I realized that that's not the case, and I really miss
Hmm.
that opportunity to share with other people that are doing the same thing,
Yeah,
and benefit from their experience, and hopefully share experiences on my side that they can benefit from.
yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Completely. I think that's the beauty of going out on your own and doing something that I see. Yeah, I see the difference between someone who has never done that and someone, those of us who have, even if you tried it for a while and come back or whatever, the experience of going out on your own and doing it is such a personal learning experience about yourself, and that I think everyone should have in some way. It's getting out of that comfort zone, especially as we get to like for us middle age and we start, you know our comfort zones are so well entrenched, and we have these expectations of our experiences and our age that we bring to things. And it's very humbling, but it's also very energizing and charged with excitement and terror. It's like
Yes,
all rolled into
absolutely.
one, you know,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it can be very lonely. And all of most of us as designers, most of us as creative, we're introverts who have to learn to be extroverted in those corporate environments. And it gets lonely. You like to be on
Yes.
your own and do your own work, but like you said, you want people to connect with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
exactly.
very
Exactly.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you studied business and economics.
Very little.
You also studied geography, I noticed in your profile. And
Yeah,
I'm
but
curious
I
about all your, yeah, your schooling, your studies, and then how you got started. I mean, I know you were in specialty ski and stuff, but where were your interests when you were that young?
yeah, this is an interesting one. So from an education perspective, frankly, it's amazing I've ever been employed. Mm, because
True.
I'm from the UK, so went to school in the UK, and the first kind of round of exams you have in the UK, when I did them, were called GCSEs. So you did like 10 GCSEs, all different subjects,
Okay.
and that was at the age of 16.
Hmm.
And I failed most of them. I was really bad at school. I was just not interested or engaged in education in those days at all.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
I retook some of the critical ones, like English, for example, and got that, and then started doing A levels, which were the subjects that you mentioned, which is that next level up, which you
Okay.
would do until you were 18.
Okay.
And after the first year of 2 years of those courses, it was just the same. I was not enjoying it at all. I was not engaged in it at all.
Yeah.
So I decided to drop out. So I never went to university. I
Hmm.
never finished those studies.
I love these
And at the
stories.
time, sorry?
I love these stories.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. At the time,
so many of us have these odd, pathways, and
yeah,
we feel it,
exactly.
but they lead to something else, and that's
They
what I love.
do. They do for sure. And I remember having, I think the day I left college or decided I was going to leave college, I remember meeting my mum for lunch and telling my mum this and what I was going to do, or rather didn't really know what I was going to do. And she asked me, so what are your plans? And I mean, I just didn't know. And I mean, can you believe it? I left college and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was like, oh, perhaps I'll join the police. I mean, I would have been the worst policeman ever.
I almost
So
did the same thing.
there we go. Okay, there we go. You see, small world.
Oh my
Um,
God. Yep. Yep.
so yeah, I was thinking about this. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll join the police. Now, in the meantime, when I was still at college, as you mentioned, one of the subjects I was doing was business studies and economics, and during those courses, I had to do work experience. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the work experience I did was in a ski shop, in a specialty ski shop in my local
Yes.
town, in my hometown. And after that work experience, they offered me a Saturday job. So I was working there over the weekends. That was great.
Nice.
And
Hmm.
then when I left college, my boss was like, well, look, why don't you come and work here until you decide what you want to do?
Love it.
And
Yeah.
that was that was 30 years ago, and I'm still basically in the same industry.
That's what
And
it leads
yeah,
to. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I was really lucky that at a very early age, I was taken to a trade show. So I was still working just weekends, and they took me to the UK's winter sports trade show up in Manchester.
Nice.
And
Nice.
I had my first exposure to brands and business,
Oh, great.
and just loved it. And then, yeah, I was then workshop manager in the ski shop, and then buyer, and then store manager, and so on and so on.
Hmm.
And that's how I got into the industry. Even at that point, I'd only even skied once before, so it wasn't like I was even super passionate about skiing. I mean, I'd done it, I'd enjoyed it,
Yeah.
but you can't. First of all, you can't really ski in the UK, Although I hope you don't have too many Scottish listeners because they're probably switching off or shouting at the screen right now. Or, so yeah, but that was how I got into the industry, and I just loved it, and
Yeah.
I loved that interaction with the consumers. I loved the process of selling,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I really, really surprisingly, I seem to be quite good at selling, which again, as an introvert, I would never have predicted.
Right. How would
But
you know? Nobody would sit there and say you'd be great at sales. You find that out by trial and error.
exactly, exactly. And I think what really drove me from that early age until probably quite recently is just the desire to do better,
Hmm.
to either sell more, sell better, but fundamentally develop myself.
Yeah.
And it's ironic that when I left retail, so 7 years later, so I was in that company essentially for 7 years. So that's a long time,
That's a
when I
long
joined as a
time.
salesperson.
Yeah.
And then I joined Columbia as a visual merchandiser because I couldn't get into sales in those days. You couldn't get a field sales role because you didn't have field sales experience. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, but hang on.
So how do I get it? And yeah. But
Exactly.
so you went right
So
from that job to Columbia.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
Okay.
I was in that company. As I said, I had various different roles, but I was basically pretty much in the same company. Yeah, until
Yeah.
I joined Columbia, and then joined as
Mm.
a visual merchandiser, and then moved into
Wow.
sales and so on and so on. But at that point when I joined Columbia, that was the age when I was like, now I want to learn.
Yeah.
Now, now how can I develop myself? And I did a lot of different courses, training courses. I did sales training, negotiation, communication, all sorts of different training courses.
Man,
And I
that's so
just
great.
loved it. I was like, wow, this is brilliant. This is like practical stuff that I can learn.
You got training
Whereas
on the job. Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
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 And whereas what 7, 8 years
Wow.
before, I was at college and I had no interest in learning, none at all. Um,
I don't
so I
think that's
think
an
I was,
uncommon thing for a lot of kids at all. I mean, it's so common that school is just not that interesting, but
yeah,
we're expected to do well, so we do it. And then when you get a break from it, you just want to get a break and you want to get away. So
exactly.
the pressures nowadays are so heavy on kids for all of that, and they weren't as much for us back then, but they were still there, you know. But
Yeah, 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 there were. I think there was this expectation to go to university,
mm,
and my sister, I have an older sister, so 6 years older than me, and she went to university. So I think, the expectation was that I would follow in what she was doing,
yeah,
but I was just like, I mean, I just could not see it at all.
yeah.
I didn't, I didn't enjoy anything. I guess maths was probably the subject at school that I disliked the least. But
I like the most, but dislike the least.
but yeah, I just had no desire to continue in education.
Yeah, even my 12-year-old son now, he's like his favorite classes, PE, and then math, so he doesn't enjoy school, but he enjoys a lot of the social aspects and creative aspects, but still it's kind of the thing to not like school
Yeah,
also, but
yeah,
but it's an interesting thing. I didn't grow up with that feeling of you need to go to university because both my parents were creatives and very successful without it, and they were in California, so they went to junior colleges and things like that. And so there was always a feeling of that I was doing well enough that I would always make a way for myself. And so I did some courses and tooled around a bit. And then I ended up working for Starbucks when they were really small in 1990, when they were tiny and no one knew who they were. I went to Portland and they opened up, and I got to become a trainer when I was 20 years old and work with Howard Schultz. and get that
Wow.
kind of, and I saw like, oh my God, I got to travel to Seattle and learn there. I thought I could have a career in coffee until I realized that I really wasn't that bad. I didn't really even drink coffee back then. But then I went into martial arts, did a bunch of that stuff, went back to school, and I ended up at Columbia Sportswear as my first industry job. And I had a design degree, but I was also working on a business degree while I was there. And Columbia supported a lot of it because they had an
Mm,
education credit. So I got a lot of training on the job, but also got to work on my business degree while I was there. So there's a strong support piece, I think, that I felt from working there that sounds like you had too.
for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, okay, I spent 7 years in retail, then 13 years at Columbia, and looking back, I it's easy for me to say I spent too long there and I should have left earlier. But the reality is I stayed because I was developing,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I don't know how many different roles. I mean, I joined as a visual merchandiser, then
Yeah. What'd
was
you
a
do?
sales rep, then a field sales manager, then a key account manager, then country manager, then European apparel sales manager.
Yeah.
So, I was there 13 years, but I had whatever that is, 5 or 6 different roles. So
Yeah.
I was
Always
always
expanding.
able to progress and develop. And as you said, there was strong support there, whether it was learning on the job, whether it was training on the job, whether it was external training,
Mm.
internal training
Mhm.
courses, the access to hundreds, if not thousands, of colleagues around the world to also
Yeah.
learn from. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, great experience. Great experience.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but then also the thinking about, how you got to watch the industry grow. Like, this is an interesting point in time. I've been looking back on the industry a lot right now, which I'm sure you are as well, because we're looking forward on how it's shifting and how it has changed over the last 25, 30 years. And when we get that perspective of how it has shifted, how it's changed, how it's grown, and our part in it, and the things that we have seen, I'm curious some of your observations. I think I put in my notes here, like, what are some of your learnings of the industry, the good, the bad, the ugly, maybe some top level things you're seeing
Yeah.
looking
Well,
back.
I mean, that is there are so well, let's start with probably the biggest macro, I don't want to say trend,
Mhm.
because I hope it isn't a trend, but the topic that's impacting the industry today,
Mhm.
which is of course sustainability and
Yeah.
the desire for brands, businesses to be more and more sustainable. I
Yeah.
mean, when I started in the industry, so oh God, when was it? So a long time ago, 30 years ago. I mean, there was nobody communicating it,
No.
and I don't think anybody really doing it either.
Mm.
And it just wasn't a consideration. And that's been, for me, a massive learning experience, because as I said, when I started out, I was motivated and driven by, if I keep it very simple, by selling more.
Yeah.
And it didn't cross my mind for a second, what did that actually mean? And hang on, what am I actually selling? And is what I'm selling good? Good for the planet, good
Yes.
for
Right.
people.
Right.
Yes, it provides a somehow a service and experience to somebody, whether it's keeping them warm, dry, or protected.
Right.
But other than that, I didn't think any beyond any way beyond that.
Mhm.
Whereas now, well, I still think, unfortunately, there are still a lot of businesses that are not paying enough attention to this topic.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of
Yeah.
businesses that are still focused purely on growing the top and the bottom line of the business,
Yeah.
irrespective of what the consequences are,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
pretty sad, and pretty
Yeah.
worrying. on the flip side of that, as an industry, I think we're one of the better industries in terms of how we're addressing this. So we also shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. But I think as an
Good
industry,
point.
we need to
Yeah.
collaborate more and learn from each other and help each other on this journey, because it is really difficult,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, if we want to be truly sustainable, we just need to stop making stuff. I mean, it's simple as that, as far as I'm concerned, because there's so much product in the world. The reality is we don't need to make anything new. We have enough
Right.
product that could last us probably, for a generation. But of course, that can't happen, because then people will not be making any money, and then that has a knock-on impact on in other ways.
Yeah, that's the whole point we've had of we were part of a major manufacturing, system. The more we make, the more money everybody makes, the better everybody does. We have more stuff. And then very, very quickly we hit a place of, okay, now we've learned that we can make a lot of stuff very quickly. We've learned that system. And now there's too much stuff. And we can't keep selling more stuff. And that's what's happened over our lifetime of the industry. And I think it's happened for all industries. But for our industry, like you said, we actually need to be the leaders of it, because we are about being outside, about the planet, about being healthy. Um, I started to look back when I was doing through a lot of what I've been doing with Struktur over the last 10 years is looking back at the history of our industry and realizing how young it actually is. The outdoor industry has been slowly growing over the last 100 years or so, but there was a massive push of it, with the development of polyester and
Mm.
certain fabrics just in the 60s and 70s, and then how it shifted in the 80s and 90s, and then there we were, right? And now it's leading fashion, it's leading clothing, it's leading the future. It's going to do that. And I think that was the thing that hit me when one of my styles was about to hit 1 million units a year. And it was a fleece style with, it getting into the water and whatnot. You start going, oh my God, I'm just contributing to the problem now. So now what do I do? you
Yeah.
know, and we're all in that boat now.
Yes.
Right. So that's a
Yeah,
huge one.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's a fortunately, there are people that are a lot smarter than me that I speak to almost every day on this topic, thank God, otherwise we'd be in trouble. So I'm optimistic, and I also feel like another, I guess, macro topic will help us on this path of sustainability, which is AI.
Mm-hmm.
Although
The
there
big
are
unknown.
arguments to say that from an energy point of view, AI uses so much energy because of the computing power that it has a negative impact from that perspective.
Yeah.
But I also think that we need to use it. We need to use that technology to help us solve these problems that
Mm-hmm.
either we haven't been able to solve, or we're too slow in our ability to solve them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm naively optimistic, I guess I would describe it,
That's a
in
great way
terms
to say
of
it.
using AI to help us solve issues around sustainability and how we can be doing things better and having less impact, and moving beyond a sustainable model to a regenerative model. I
Yep.
can't even say it.
It'll become a regular
I
word pretty
Yeah,
soon.
I think that, yeah, I'm, yeah, as I said, naively optimistic
Yeah, I
on
think
that side.
naive is the word, is the key word for all of us around AI. And I think I think that's why we all need to collaborate and work together so much more on it. We have to, to
Yeah.
understand it. So we know that's coming. We're all trying to learn a little bit about it. I'm not even sure how to learn about it, where to learn about it. Do you like, how does that factor into what you're doing now too? I'm just going to do a little side note. How does AI factor
Yeah.
into this?
I Right now, I guess I use AI for two main purposes. One is to help me generate ideas and structure in terms of creating content.
Mm.
and the other is to learn about things.
Mhm.
That's the two areas that I use it today. But I'm a YouTube fan, and I have realized that you can pretty much learn to do anything on YouTube.
Yes, you can.
Not necessarily to a good level, but I would add, but I just like discovering new things. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm I like technology. I like things that make me more efficient so that
Mhm.
I can spend more time with my family, more time, with my clients, whatever it might be, and less time doing things that don't add a lot of value.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for things. Okay, uh, yeah, like I said, how can I learn things more quickly, or how can I generate ideas to create content?
Yeah. I want to use that to move into your job now because with all of, product sales, AI, generating content, what you're doing now is you're really working with people, which is something I often tell people what I'm doing now too. I haven't been working on product for a while. I miss it a little bit because I want to make an impact in lots of different ways. But working with people is really important to me. And I think that's like when you started moving into this, I was really, really excited and wanted to learn more as well. I've had varying degrees of experience and success with headhunters as well, and I've gotten most of my jobs through headhunting. So, but also you're doing a couple of things here, like you're transferring over to working with people, but you're also, through your podcast and the mentoring aspect, there's that feeling of sharing, like you said, more efficiently with more people and connecting more. I want to talk a little bit about the more in depth about why you chose to go into this field, because we've talked a little bit about that the last time we chatted, and why that was important to you, and start there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I guess if I strip everything back, because as I said, I've been, or I am somebody that is quite a human leader, or I hope I'm quite a human leader. I I do want to help others. I'm somebody that will watch. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm somebody that will watch. I don't know, something on the TV about people working in a hospital or whatever, and I'll switch off that and I'll be like, what am I doing? You know, what am I contributing to the world? Basically, very little, if anything. And I feel like this is just so unfulfilling. How can I do more?
Yeah, yeah,
And in my previous roles, I guess I've been able to do a little bit in terms of supporting other people, but it's it's never felt like enough for me.
yeah,
So I wanted to find a way that I could help more people, but also, of course, generate an income. I'm not
yeah,
in the position where I can't not work and not generate an income.
right.
And based on my experience working with headhunters as a hiring manager, I realized that actually, if you do this well and you provide a good service and provide great candidates for your employees, you can make reasonable money to do this.
Mhm, mhm.
So that was definitely a motivation as well.
Yep.
And it was interesting because when I started, so back in November or December 2022,
Mhm.
I I quickly realized that actually being a headhunter, I disappoint fundamentally 99% of people that I interact with
Oh.
because only one person ever gets the job. And at the moment, I work on my own. So I'll place, once I'm really established, I'll place, I don't know, 15, 20 maybe people a year. in the seniority of the roles that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And on average, I'll speak to 100 people per role, let's say. And of
That's
course, only one
brutal.
person gets the role.
Yeah. Oh, that's brutal.
So I'm like,
That's
hang on a
hard.
minute. It suddenly dawned on me, like, actually, this is even worse.
Wow.
I'm disappointing like 99% of people. So
Yeah.
I decided at the start of 23 that, okay, I need to somehow figure out a way to help the other 99%. So I
Mm.
launched at the very start of 2023 a career development coaching service,
Right.
because I always enjoyed coaching in my previous roles, particularly when I was at Salomon. I loved getting to know people on a deeper level, really, really kind of not being their manager, but being able to listen to them and guide them and share advice
Yeah.
and just support people. I really, really enjoyed it. So I thought, okay, well, I can do this and maybe I'll be able to generate a little bit of revenue as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I did it, and I built up a reasonable client base. But again, quite quickly, I realized, but actually, I don't really enjoy it, because
Oh.
whereas the coaching I did at Salomon, it was part of a bigger project, a bigger purpose within a company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This coaching that I was doing, it was very transactional. It's by the hour, it's over Zoom.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to really build any kind of meaningful relationship with somebody. Like I said,
Oh.
it's very transactional. So it's by the hour. So, time's up, next.
Yeah.
And also I realized that, again, I'm helping a few people, but I'm going from disappointing 99% of people to maybe 97% of people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, this just doesn't work. I'm
Not very efficient. Mm-mm.
not efficient at all. And going back to
Yep.
my desire to be efficient, I was like, okay, well, how can I help more people?
Yeah.
And that's when I came up with the idea for Sports and Outdoor Mentors, which is my podcast and YouTube channel. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, there are so many smart people in our industry,
Yeah.
much smarter and much more experienced than me.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I interview them, get them to share their experiences of building brands, leading people, and let other people benefit from that experience?
Yeah,
So
that's great.
that's kind of where the idea started. So now, hopefully, now it's more like 90% of people are disappointed, but hopefully it'll grow to be more.
It sounds to me also the person you want to disappoint the least is yourself. Because at the end of the day, it's coming back to how do you feel about the work you did and put into the world, and who did you help? I think the older that I get, that's how I hit, is not so much of what are all these great things I did that look impressive. It's like, who did I help? How did I make anybody else's life better? And that's a big shift. I don't know that many people feel that when they're younger. I didn't. And it definitely has shifted in my head. And
Yeah,
so that feeling of doing this, like that you don't want to disappoint yourself, but because you're seeing people who need the help and it's there. So it's a connective. I think that's similar to the challenges that I had and have with Struktur too, is that, that there's things there that will help people and you want to bring them together. And what are the the challenges that I have are making that cost effective, and people know that, like, how do you monetize that is always the biggest question. And a lot of times it's not there, and then it's not going to survive. And so finding ways to monetize it is how you create a system,
yeah,
because money is energy, and that's what keeps it flowing. And I
yeah,
think if we think about it that way, then it's not this evil thing. It's a necessary thing that needs to be there for it to
yeah,
happen. So
yeah.
the other
No,
piece
exactly.
you and I talked about before was, I mentioned the writer Seth Godin, and he talked about the same thing, which was he wanted to reach a lot of people. So he decided he didn't want to do one-on-one coaching, that he would write books, or that he would do a podcast. He would do things to reach, because his goal was to reach as many people as possible. And that's what this sounds like to me too,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think for me, I as much as sometimes I think, when we're in our industry, I consider myself to be part of the sports and outdoor industry. You kind of as an individual, you look at it and think, wow, this is very big. But the reality is the sports and outdoor industry is small. It's a niche industry.
Yeah.
So I'm very much focused on a niche industry, and
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
comfortable with that because that's where my knowledge and my skills come from. But yeah, within that industry, absolutely. I mean, my vision for sports and outdoor mentors is that it's becomes, a reference, a long-term reference for people, a tool for people to learn and benefit from.
Hmm. Hmm.
The content is hopefully evergreen, so
Yeah.
it's as relevant today as it will be in 2 years, I hope. That's the goal for me. So even though being a sales guy, it's difficult not to get pulled into the numbers. I need to be patient and kind of let it grow organically.
Right. Right.
But I'm
Long
not very
game.
good at being patient.
Well, the pressure from our industry to build quickly and build on it all the time. What we're doing here is a long game, and
Yes.
it is a long, slow. I think working for a company like Columbia, which is always about long, slow growth anyway, is helpful. They were not, big risk takers in a lot of those spaces. But you talk about in your videos and online about how you wanted to focus on the mentoring because of your regrets of not having a
Yeah.
mentor. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I'm a bit worried about talking about this because I think I'm gonna I'm gonna come across like an arsehole. If I'm not sure if I can swear, but I guess I just have. So
You can swear. It's my channel, it's my podcast. You can swear all
okay.
you want. And if it doesn't turn out right, we can edit it out.
Yeah, we can cut it out. No, no, I so as I said, the original desire for doing this was to help the 99%. But then when I started thinking about it, I was like, I've never had in my career a mentor, somebody that I would consider to be a mentor. I've had some great leaders, some great managers for sure,
Mhm.
but I've never worked with anybody. I had somebody that I spoke to kind of outside of the day-to-day context of work. And I regret that. I feel like I feel like maybe I could have done better, done more in my career if I'd have had a
Hmm.
mentor, if I'd have had guidance.
Hmm. Hmm.
But also, I think there's one reason why, at least in the early days of my career, why I didn't have a mentor. And this is where I think I'm going to come across so badly. But I there wasn't somebody that I worked with or knew where I was like, okay, I know they can do or they are doing what I want to do. And they're somebody where, yeah, that's somebody where I could learn to, I look up to, they're inspirational to me. I didn't have anybody like that.
Hmm.
I There are a few people I would say in my career that have been inspirational. One of which I'm not going to name, but who was a leader at Columbia. Well, actually, no, I will name Mick McCormick.
Yeah.
Uh, a very inspirational leader.
Hmm.
But to me, at that point in my career, he was so far away from me.
Yeah.
It was like, it wouldn't have been right. It would be weird. It would have been like me asking the CEO to be my mentor,
Yep.
as a sales
A
rep.
little
It just didn't
presumptuous.
exactly.
Yeah.
So because I always think, when you're looking for a mentor, you need to look for somebody that has kind of been where you want to be or is doing or has experience of doing what you want to do,
Yeah.
but also is maybe at the level above or the level above that at most. It can't
Yeah.
be too far disconnected.
Yep. Yes.
So I there was nobody there where I was like, that's somebody, I want to approach. And I
Yeah.
felt almost sometimes a little bit like, what am I going to learn from them? which
It
is
doesn't,
sounds terrible,
it
but
doesn't sound terrible, but I understand because, you're also a very good natured, Brit. So, you know, I would say that like anybody I talk to from your neck of the woods always says, yeah, it's just very, yes, aware and kind. But yeah, it doesn't sound awful. Not to me
okay.
anyway. It doesn't, because I hear it so much, and I hear it, I mean, maybe I hear it a lot over here in the US, but I hear it so much. And I literally know nobody else who has said to me that they've had a mentor. Most people have said, I didn't have a mentor. I wish I did. And I did have one. And so I had a strong one in Robin Hall, who was there at Columbia.
Yeah.
And for those exact reasons that you said, she was a couple levels above me, but I got to report directly to her, and she opened a lot of doors for me. And then she became a coach, and I followed her for many, many years until her passing. And so I've heard this a lot from people who have had a mentor. And so it's been interesting for me to hear the stories of why those regrets were there, and that people then say, I want to be one. How can I be one? How can I get connected to people? How can I
Mhm.
help? And I've had a lot of people come to me with that. How can I connect with people? And I think people have connected through Struktur. I have seen that happen.
I'm sure. I'm
So, and
sure.
yeah, but to your point, I don't think it's not, it hasn't been something that's consciously there. At least when we were growing up, we weren't having a bunch of people around us who were older, who were wanting to be mentors necessarily. And a lot of them just came from being in management roles, which is very different than being a mentor.
Yeah.
Can you talk
Yeah.
about that? What are your views on the difference between being managed and mentored?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think first I would say that, there's a difference between being managed and led,
Yes,
as in the
absolutely.
difference between a manager and a leader. I think a manager is somebody who directs you. I think a leader is somebody who guides and supports you. And I think there's a lot more in common between a leader and a mentor. I think, and then you have you have coaches as well, and I think there's also
Right.
a difference in coaches between between coaches and mentors. I think my opinion of a mentor is somebody that can guide you, that can give you advice if you are in a situation, and it's somebody that is willing to listen, of course,
Mhm.
but also give advice, or at the least share their perspective.
Mhm.
I think on the other hand, coaches are, it's much more about just asking the question and
Mhm.
letting that the person come to their own conclusions.
Oh,
And
interesting. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think with mentors, I do see that a little bit differently.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think, yeah, I think in our industry, and I'm sure it's the same in many industries, unfortunately, the quality of managers is oftentimes not so great,
Right.
because
Right.
as an industry, we are, well, no, it's not our industry. I think it's generally, I think experts are promoted into management roles.
Mm.
And for many, that's great, and they're able to take it on. But for many, they're not. Just
Right.
because you're an amazing designer doesn't mean you're going to be a great design leader or design manager. In the
Absolutely.
same way that as a sales, as a good sales rep doesn't mean you're going to make a good sales manager.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
the
Or
skill
or
is
or enjoy it. You might not enjoy it.
exactly, yeah,
Right.
exactly. The skill is
Yeah.
very different, I would say.
Yeah.
So I think there is an issue, and maybe this goes back to a previous topic around kind of growing pains
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the industry. I think, again, though it's not industry specific, but there is a fundamental issue in this day and age
Yes.
around employee engagement. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that stems from poor leadership.
It's
Um,
like you're saying, it's not industry specific. It seems to be business structure and corporate specific. globally.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I did recently spoke at a running industry conference in the UK about
Mm-hmm.
employee engagement, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure, let me get the stats right. I'm pretty sure it's 23%, only 23% of the global workforce would consider themselves to be engaged in their
Yeah,
role.
that's amazing.
Um, and I
Yeah.
think it's something like 18% or something that is actively disengaged, and then the rest is what we would refer to now as quiet quitting,
Oh,
just kind of, doing the bare
yeah.
minimum, and maybe sometimes not even, just to get by. And
Wow.
when you look at the way to address this topic, 80% of it can be addressed through a better approach to leadership and management, having a more
Mm-hmm.
empathetic approach to leadership, to really listening to people, to support and not to direct,
Mm.
to give people purpose in what they want to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
to make people feel like they're adding value to the business rather than
Yeah.
just, doing the minimum.
Yeah. And how do you do that through what you're doing now? Like that contribution through, making the right connections, right? Like a dating service.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's right now it's very sporadic and tactical, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just through discussions I'll try and connect people on a very kind of manual basis. But I would like sports and outdoor mentors to become something much more than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just don't have the resources
Right.
and the time to do that at the moment, but
Well,
that's my goal.
I was looking at that and I said in my notes, like you basically have created a second job for yourself instantly. In a very short amount of time, you've given yourself, one major new role to take on. And then you've given yourself another, because doing that with the mentoring podcast, it's a whole job. It's a big undertaking. But I also see I was going to ask about, like, potential conflicts between doing recruitment and the mentoring podcast. But then on the flip side, I can see the benefits already. I don't know if there are really any conflicts, but I can see the benefits of, being able to place people, helping the company, helping the candidates, and then the podcast not only helping the candidates that maybe didn't get placed, but continuing to help the candidates who are placed and the companies. It's a resource for continued conversation and learning, which is what needs to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. I think for me, the goal of Sports and Outdoor Mentors is to be a resource to enable people to continue their personal development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We can all learn from others,
Yep. Yep.
and for sure we can learn more or less from some than others, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But I, again, going back to kind of the stage of my career when I joined Columbia, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that as individuals we're open to continually developing, and that's what I hope we can provide with Sports and Outdoor Mentors.
Mm.
I don't see a conflict. It's an interesting point. I hadn't I Until you sent your notes through, I hadn't even really thought about it. Maybe again a little bit naively. Of
You don't
course,
want to
I'm in.
plant a seed that doesn't need to be there and grow either.
No, but it's a good it's a good thing to do. I think it's a good reflection for me to, ask myself that, and ask
Mm.
the people that I'm interviewing, and my clients, um,
Mm.
some of which, can be the same, of course.
Right.
I think the way I view it, and to your point about two jobs, I don't view it like that, although it definitely could be that could be the case. I kind of the way I describe it when I meet people is I say, okay, headhunting is my day job, and the podcasting is my night job, and
Moonlighting.
today my day job pays for my night job,
Yep.
or at least let's say that's the goal. But to your point about monetization of structure, that of course is my goal as well. Because I want to continue to elevate the content.
Right.
Now what I'm doing is, it's okay, but it could be much better in terms of audio and visual content, in terms of the locations, etc., that we film in. But to do that, I need to monetize it, which means, as you know well, it means sponsorship primarily, because unless you're getting millions of views, you're not going to generate the ad revenue through any of the platforms.
No.
And because we focus, as we discussed, on a niche, even in the best will of the world, that's not going to happen. So yeah, I spend, I would say, 20% of my time on sports and outdoor mentors and 80% of my time on headhunting. And because, as I said, the financial opportunity with headhunting, it is pretty good, at least based on what I need in life.
Yep.
I'm able to give that time up, that 20%, to focus on sports and outdoor mentors.
That's great.
In the goal to hopefully, help more people. Now, of course, I'm also not naive enough to think that what I do in sports and outdoor mentors will also help the headhunting side, if only in the sense that it makes me more visible within my target market.
Yeah, it gives you more of a sense of being an expert, and connected. It's a networking, it shows the connection and the openness. And I think that's the thing about YouTube and podcasts these days, is it's very front facing. Everybody sees it, it's very visible, but it's also very, it's easier to do. And if you enjoy it, like I love this, it's fun to do, and you're able to make it happen. It seems like it's working, like, so far. Like, what are the things that you have found to be working the best so far since you've been doing this over the last 6 months, year? You just launched the podcast a few months ago, so.
Yeah, so we've launched, how many episodes have we done? I think we've done 6 episodes we've launched so far. We launch every Sunday on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. There's my plug.
Good.
And I think, and I've filmed, let's say I've already recorded, I think, about 15 episodes. And over those 15, of course, there are some that I've enjoyed the conversations more than others. And some, we were saying before we started, that actually it's often the ones that you don't expect as much from that you enjoy more. And that's definitely been the case for me. For different reasons, my expectations were maybe not super high, but it's blown me away. Some have been very emotional, some have kind of touched me emotionally. In all cases, I've learned. I think one of the things I've really learned as well is that, and this shouldn't really be a surprise, I guess, but there's a lot of points that come up consistently.
Those are big learnings.
Exactly.
Those are the big ones where and you're not expecting them. Like, are there any that come to top of mind? Of course, I'm going to ask that. There may not be, but just ask.
I mean, I think that the thing is, they're obvious, and saying them out loud, they're very obvious. But the learning from your mistakes and being able to accept making mistakes is a big one. I mean, to give context, the people that I've been interviewing up until now, I would say it's 80% CEOs. So there's been CEOs, chairman, chief people officer, for brands ranging anywhere from 10 million up to 2.5 billion in terms of revenue. So a big variety of people. But I think that ability to learn from the mistakes, the importance of having passion in the industry, that has come up consistently. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think after we've done, I don't know, maybe 50,
Mhm.
we'll put something together to share this.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
those kind of highlights, if you like.
And there will probably be something new in there that you haven't even thought of that'll rise to the
For
top
sure.
as well. Yeah.
For
That's
sure.
what's so
Yeah.
amazing of this. You know, I
Yeah.
just think that the learning that we have from each other, that's what it is. It's a human sharing, human learning. And I think the piece of being able to make mistakes is really important because people are so gun shy with it. I mean, I love hearing that from the CEOs because I feel like there's a lot of fear from CEOs and leadership that there's not a lot of space right now financially for them to make mistakes. And so there's not a lot of risk taking.
Yeah.
So sharing that is important, but then also how do you operate with that? You know, if you don't have a board that supports that, if you don't have the space, what kind of mistakes, what kinds of risks? It's I'm sure you're seeing plenty of that around now in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also very easy to say and not very easy to do. And
Hmm. Hmm.
I think if you can, as a CEO of a business, if you can live by that and show your team that actually that is the way you are and that is the way you act,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that's can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But it's definitely easier to say than to do.
Hmm.
And personally, it's something that I am terrible at. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not that I'm terrible in learning from my mistakes. Hopefully, I'm good at that. But I think traditionally, I'm very to your last point. Actually, I'm very risk averse, and I traditionally, I would say, wouldn't put myself in a situation where I'm likely to fail.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now I think I've got better at that recently, having started my own business and launched the
Absolutely.
podcast.
Yep.
But
Yep. And you're doing it very
it's
publicly
yes,
where everyone
yeah.
can see you. Yeah.
But I think because I'm doing that though, because I'm, it's almost like I want to be accountable to,
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, not everyone, but you know what I mean. I just want to 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 be accountable in somehow providing value, in
Yeah.
making sure that I am providing value.
That's about being accountable to yourself. That's something I
Yeah,
talk a lot about. It was with my own thing I learned through martial arts is you have to make a lot of mistakes. You have to fall down a lot. And that was not something I grew up being willing to do. And that was something that my teacher from all my black belt tests and all my other they would call out, you know, that I wanted to get it perfect before I even went out on the floor and showed it. Practicing like, well, you're not going to get it unless you go out there and fall down a lot. And that I saw that translate into my career and later on be an issue. And I think even with structure, I had to get to a point where I realized a couple years ago that I need to let myself fail and I need to let myself fail publicly because I needed to hold myself accountable and stick with something. And
yeah.
so I
But
see it. Yeah.
it's exactly the same for me. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some deep-rooted psychological
Dig into
issue.
we'll dig
Um,
into the childhood stuff, which we won't do
yeah,
here. But
exactly.
yeah, 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 yeah. But that need to do well, to be perfect, you know. I mean, I have an English side to me of my family that comes from both English and Swedish side of me on my side, which is very buttoned up, very, and it serves to a point. And but to make mistakes and be able to fall down, and you know fail at a lot at things and see failure, like we would say, failure is one step closer to success. It's
Yeah,
not a bad thing. You're going to fail at some things, and
yeah,
it's the word gets loaded, but really it's the fact that you tried. And if you try again, we would say in martial arts, you do it once, you're one time good. If you do it
yeah,
100 times, you're 100 times good. And you just keep going. There's no end. The only failure is when you quit on something that you don't want to, that you really want to get better at and that you just don't do. So all those chances you don't take, right? So
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
but so I have one more topic to kind of cover before we sign off. And I brought that up earlier, which was something that people have brought up a lot to me as we've been seeing more layoffs and challenges in the industry. Challenges with recruitment is a big one, is the feeling of pigeonholing. And I see it mostly in the creative realm because I talk with designers all the time. But it's not just there. I know it's not just there, but I see it with brands that are also sticking to either, what they know, like hiring people from places that they already know that pipeline of skill set, or they're hiring from the few big brands that are, or brands that are growing and doing well, and everybody just wants the name. I see you nodding already here. You
Yeah.
want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think I know a lot of people would love to.
Yeah, where to start? I think it absolutely happens exactly as you describe it. I think the first thing I would say, if I try and position this from the candidate's perspective,
Mm.
I think I speak to a lot of people. I get contacted daily, many times, the people that would like to talk to me about, how to get a role, etc. And I think the first thing people that should always understand is that when they're speaking to an external recruiter, a headhunter, 9 times out of 10, that person is trying to fill a specific role. So, as a headhunter,
Right.
as a recruiter, we work for a client, and that client has said to us, okay, we want to fill X role.
Yeah.
Go out and find, as I said, 100 people, let's say, narrow it down, qualify them, etc., and provide us with a short list.
Yes.
So when I'm given a role to go to search for, I will, if it's a sales director role, let's say, I will look for certain keywords in people's CVs, on people's LinkedIn profiles. I'll, of course, look at my network as well, people that I know. But because of the volume of people that I speak to, unless you are absolutely top of mind,
Right.
it's very difficult for me to remember that I spoke to somebody even a week ago. This is going to sound like I have a very bad memory, but again, just think about the volume of people that I speak to.
Yeah. Yeah.
That their career has been, I don't know, in customer service or something, and they want to move into sales.
Mm-hmm.
But for me to remember that about that person,
Right.
unless it's very clear in their resume or CV or on their LinkedIn profile that they want to make this change, it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
It's
And
not
that
going to
is
rise
why
up
people
enough.
are pigeonholed.
Mm-hmm.
It's, if you want to be considered for something outside of your core competency or outside of your industry, you have to make yourself visible and top of mind in
Mm-hmm.
that industry, or with that expertise or competency front and center. You can't, I see so many people's profiles on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
under their name, you've got your kind of profile title. So I have global headhunter, sports and outdoor industry veteran. I see
Yep.
so many people that have sales / marketing / customer success / It's like,
Too many
hang on a minute,
slashes.
what
Yeah.
are you?
Yep.
You,
Yeah.
and okay, maybe, that'll work, but I would say make a choice. What in your title, be what you write, what you want to be, not
Yeah.
what your experience is,
Mm-hmm. So
because
they're
if I'm so,
casting too wide of a net with too many slashes.
exactly. So I think to avoid pigeonholing, which does happen, but for the reasons that I've already expressed, I think people have to be more intentional about what they want to do and where they want to work. And
Yes. Yes. Yes.
that,
That
I'm
makes
not
sense.
saying that, you have to like cut out 99%. And what I would say to many people is, you need to have a very generic CV that you keep for yourself. And then
Hmm.
you need to have some specific ones that you take the bits out of your CV that are targeted towards being a sales director, or let's say being a sales director in the sports industry, being a sales director in
Yeah.
another industry. You need to be ready, depending on who you're talking to have the right assets.
Hmm.
But it's not easy. It's
It's
really not
not.
easy. You
Yeah.
have to make yourself visible, and especially to your point, today in the industry, in our industry, and in many industries, more people are being laid off than are being hired.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I say to everybody I speak to every day, make yourself more visible. Be
Hmm.
clear about who you are, what you want to do, and what value you add.
Hmm.
Who you are, what value, and three things that where you add value that gives you a point of difference. And then once you've done that, then make yourself visible in your target market. And there's three ways to make yourself visible. The first is to speak to people like me. So
Hmm.
speak to specialist recruiters within your target market. And I say specialist because you'll tend to get more value from specialist recruiters rather than
Yes.
more generic ones. I'm
Yes.
sure that's not always the case, but as a general rule.
Yeah.
The second is I would encourage people to engage within their target industry. So attend events, whether it's physical or virtual.
Yep.
And of course, the benefit of that is networking. That goes without saying. But the benefit of
Yeah.
that is also is when you're interviewing for a role, once you get that interview, if you're not either in a role or you're not in that industry, you can share with that person, oh yeah, at the conference I was at last week, I learned this. And it's like, oh, hang on a minute. Okay, this person is not necessarily in the industry or not in a current role, but they're engaged in the industry.
Yeah.
They're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And you can show that you're learning. Oh yeah, I noticed that the industry as a whole is probably being affected by kind of the following macroeconomic trends, which they learned at this conference.
Hmm.
And lastly, it can also give you potential ideas to create content from. And that
Yes.
comes to the last point around visibility, which for me is LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And LinkedIn, I joined LinkedIn in 2005, and I think back then
That's probably
it
when I
was
did too.
basically a platform to kind of put your resume and CV on, and that was about it.
And
And
nobody had
now,
photos. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah. Yeah.
left it blank.
Yeah.
And now I think there's about a billion people now on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and there are some very strong communities within industries. And
Yes. Absolutely.
if one, your profile is targeted towards your industry, and when I say that, I'm talking about the use of the right keywords within your profile.
Hmm.
And two, if you engage in your industry, so you're following the right people, you're commenting on the right people's posts, you're ideally posting yourself once a week, I would say,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can quickly become visible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I saw your post. I think it was actually today. I don't know when you posted it, but it showed up for me about, why you're on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I've never had anybody, I love how you address it, the questions as a professional, as an expert in that. And I agree. It's like LinkedIn to me, when I think about the social platforms I must engage on when I want to pare them down and not be everywhere. I don't do anything on Facebook anymore. Instagram has a very limited sort of place. But LinkedIn is absolutely key especially for our industry, but other industries as well. But for ours, is huge. And if your presence isn't there and you don't have you don't seem as engaged professional, it's harder for me to take you seriously. I notice that feeling within myself. So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And it doesn't, I think people think it takes a long time, and of course it can do if you want it to, but if you're either in a job or looking for a job, I would encourage people to spend 15 minutes a day engaging in other people's content,
Hmm.
and once a week 30 minutes to an hour creating your own content and posting your own
Yeah.
content.
Yeah.
and it doesn't need to be more than that.
Yeah.
And it's surprising, you can quite quickly create a growing network and growing following. It's like I describe it as being at the top of the mountain. You've made your snowball, and at the top of the mountain it's small. When you roll it down, and by the time it gets to the bottom of the mountain, it's this big,
Yeah.
avalanche that's coming down.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
starts small, and I
Yeah.
think it's tough to begin with because you don't get any views and you don't get any likes or comments, and that can be tough to take.
Yeah.
But consistency is really, really important with anything, actually, any social network, but certainly what my experience with LinkedIn,
Yeah.
if you're consistent, it's the growth is exponential. You're kind of, even though somehow you must be, but you're not starting from zero each time.
Yeah.
It grows and it builds.
And I find that LinkedIn is the people are so much more eager to build their network too, that people are wanting to cast their net out, and so that it can be one of the easier ones to grow because you have so much of your own personal information people can see there, or personal professional information, I should say. And it's really kept at that level. So there's a protective, barrier, I think, to all the personal stuff to keep it professional. So that's what I love
Yeah,
about it versus all the other
yeah,
social media where it can, the wrong stuff, the personal, how do I tackle it? It's like this very clear what this is for.
yes,
And I think
yeah,
that's what makes it successful. But I also, to your point of, really when we talk about pigeonholing, and the idea is like, well, in order to not be pigeonholed, you have to not pigeonhole yourself, but direct. It's almost like narrow it down
yeah.
yourself for
It's
certain things. But
yeah,
there's something in martial arts that's about that too, is like in order for you to have the results you want in a fight or scenario, you have to set your intention to how you, and it's constantly changing, but you have to set your intention on where you want to go. And it's as simple as when you spin or throw a strike, your eyes have to go there first. And wherever you look is where your hand or your foot is going to go. And it's almost like you don't even have to target, you just use your eyes. And so to me it's the same kind of thing, like you have to set your intention on what you want, and then everything will kind of follow it there. So that's what I'm hearing from you.
yeah. I think you've articulated it much better than I could have and did. Because I know people don't want to hear that. People, "Oh, I don't want to be put in the box," and I'm like, I
Right.
get it, but if you can't clearly articulate who you are and what you want to do, how the hell do you expect somebody else to be able to do it? You
You're
know,
right. And it's not that you don't have to let go of everything else. You're just,
for sure
if there's
not.
something you want to do right there, then you focus it.
Yeah,
And you can then,
I
if
th
there's something else you want to do, you can focus there,
yeah,
So,
exactly. I think it comes back to probably the best piece of advice I've ever received, and probably the simplest piece of advice I've ever received, was in my very early days at Columbia. Was somebody who is now a very good friend and in fact the godfather of my son. And I remember sitting in a bar in Dublin. This is how all the best stories start. No, we were sitting in this bar after a hard day's work, and he said to me, "Dan, if you fail to prepare, you need to prepare to fail." And that's it, and
yeah.
it's true.
Yes.
You get out what you put in, and if you don't have a plan of
Yes.
where you want to go, okay, maybe for some people it works. For me, it doesn't. I need
Yeah.
to have an idea of where I want to go, and I need to have an idea of how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, it changes. I mean, that's clear. The plan never stays the same.
Yeah.
As I can't remember who said it, but you know, the best plans
Mm.
change as soon as they kind of, as soon as you kick it off.
Yes.
You have to
Yes.
realize, no, we can't go left. We need to go right or whatever.
But you have
But
to
if
start
you
with a plan. You have to
exactly,
start with one. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah,
You have to start. And I think that's the point. And then be prepared to be flexible. But like you said,
exactly.
if you don't know where you're going to go, then you just be prepared for the fact that I think if you don't know if you don't set your intention somewhere, something else is going to set it for you.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're going to end up where there's always going to be things that pop up that you're like, wow, like you said, I never could have planned for that. But it's because you planned for something else and you moved in that direction that something else made itself known and available to you.
Yeah.
And that's how we keep going. And you keep
Yeah, and I
trying
think a
things.
lot of the times the stuff that pops up can be super interesting and really great, but that's fine, then you'll adjust your plan again.
Exactly.
And it's so easy to say this and it's so difficult to do. And in this day and age, it's very easy to be distracted, and I'm the worst person for this. I mean, I could procrastinate for Britain, it's but yeah, I try to be intentional in what I do.
Yeah.
I really try to be intentional
Yeah.
and then see. And I need to get better at failing, but yeah, or putting myself in situations where I can fail.
Mhm.
But I usually have a plan. Usually it changes a lot, but
It's always
that's
a
life.
journey. It's a journey. It's a journey. So last little, any final words of, bright spots or guidance or things for the future that you see, for the rest of us? Last
Well,
words.
I think maybe I'll start with the dark shadows, as you put it. I think to be very pragmatic about the current situation in the market. It is tough
Mm-hmm.
out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Most businesses are not performing as they would like. There's a lot of excess inventory in the marketplace,
Right.
and when that happens, it means that that's cash basically sitting there. So businesses' cash flows are restricted, which means they're not taking risks, and in many cases, they're not hiring.
Mm-hmm.
And for big public companies, it means they're probably cost cutting. And we all know that when cost cutting happens, it's people and it's marketing.
Right.
So it is tough out there, which again means it's so important to make yourself visible in the
Mm-hmm.
market, even more important than normal, because there aren't that many people that are looking for people. So you need to be
Yeah.
seen. But I am super optimistic for the future. I think as an industry, we are incredibly resilient, and
Yes.
we are, I think, well positioned to continue to benefit from the desire that people have to spend more time outdoors, and
Yeah.
not just the desire but the need.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Mm-hmm.
I and we need to, as an industry, we need to push those messages. When I mean,
Yeah.
I don't live in the UK anymore, I live in France, but when I hear the statistic that in the UK so people in prison are spending more time outdoors than children.
Oh God.
We have a job to do as an industry, and think about the opportunity
Yeah.
that gives us. And
Wow.
it's we're not selling cigarettes or alcohol. We're
Yeah.
selling, oh God, I sound like a hippie now, but we're selling an experience, a lifestyle, and it's a good one. It's a healthy one,
Absolutely.
and mentally and physically. So I'm super optimistic for the future. I
Yeah.
think, like we already talked about, as an industry, we're somewhat leading in terms of the sustainability revolution,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even though of course there's a lot more to do. But yeah, I'm really optimistic for the future. And yeah, and I think, as I said, I guess my last bit of advice, guidance would be, again, the same thing, is don't be afraid to make yourself visible. It's Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and keep learning, keep developing.
Yeah. It's a great message. And you're doing great work with it. I was very excited to see all these shifts that you were moving into these. Because, like I said, there are very few people doing this, and I'm connecting with a lot of those who are, and it's it's really needed, necessary with all the content that we're all absorbing, entertainment wise and whatnot. I think the learning that people want to do now, the self education, learning, and growth, that whole as an industry is just going to skyrocket. And I love seeing that, and to be
Yes.
able to help provide that mentoring and that sharing of knowledge. It just means everything to me, and I can see it's a big passion for you, and it's really fun to share that here. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. No problem. Anytime, anytime.
You have been listening to UnStruktured, the podcast from Struktur Society. If you enjoyed this episode, please download, share, like, subscribe, and add your thoughts and suggestions in the comments. Also, please consider a Substack paid subscription to help us bring even more meaningful content and connection points to you and our creator community. Here you'll find articles and news, as well as the podcast and additional content. We cannot grow without you. Thanks for listening, and talk to you soon.